So in this class, I'm going to have a look at your test preparation for NTAD6212. Now, if I go into RC Learn firstly, and if I click on my module, which is NTAD6212, if I click on the learning units, you will see that the course comprises of 5 learning units, okay? Now, what is going to be tested in the test next week, Thursday? If I look at my module outline document, you'll see that so far we've focused on the assignment, which counts 25% of your marks. Your ICE activities have been given to you as well, which is due on Thursday this week. Now that counts 10%. So 10% plus your 25% is 35% for the assignment and the ICE activities. The test, which we are writing next week, Thursday, is going to cover 30%, and it covers learning units 1 and 2. Now, what work is covered in learning units 1 and 2? If I scroll down on the module outline document and I look at learning unit 1, learning unit 1, it says that it covers Active Directory installation and then Active Directory concepts. Now, which chapters are covered in your textbook? I can see that it is chapter 1, and then so they look at now roles and Active Directory roles and installation. Here they give us some of the different topics that are covered in theme 1, and then in theme 2 they look at Active Directory concepts such as objects in Active Directory, group policies, etc. And then they look at System Center Configuration Manager. In the second learning unit, Active Directory Object and Management, there's 2 topics here, which is Active Directory Account Management and Active Directory and account policies. That's part of Active Directory as well. Now here you can see the chapters that are covered is chapter 2 and then chapter 3. So in chapter 2, they are looking at the main functions of Active Directory objects, creating and managing organizational units. Now, most of these concepts you should be familiar with. You've done it in the first semester as well. Then in theme 2, they look at Active Directory policies, group policy objects, and so that is the scope of the work that is covered. Then if I look at RC Learn now, on RC Learn, I see, okay, what are the main things that they've highlighted here? Information about resources connected to a network that uses computers, applications, and their network and access. Authentication, data storage, information lookups, Active Directory domain services, Windows Server, Active Directory forecast, group policy objects, trees, domains. So if I scroll down into the learning unit and I look at what is the type of content that they have here, they speak about Active Directory roles and then installation, okay? And then they've got a diagram that looks at Active Directory concepts, policies, servers, workstations, users, etc. So I do the same now for that was theme 1 and then theme 2. I can scroll into the theme and then just briefly have a look at what's covered within the theme. Okay, so I'll scroll through and then have a look at what's covered within the theme. Now, remember also that apart from looking at the information that's covered in the themes and on RC Learn, here they're covering concepts like Active Directory objects, schemas, flexible single master operations, trees, forest domains, domain policies, etc. Okay, so apart from familiarizing myself with this content, I will then go to more resources on the left-hand side. And under more resources, the 2 important things that you need to take note of when you are preparing for your test is the lecture slides, number 1. So you're going to go through the lecture slides for chapters 1, 2, and 3, right? So if I open up the link, it wants me to download it. I am not going to download it. I'm going to look for it. I'm just going to open it up on my computer. So I've got the slides here. So chapters 1, 2, and 3 is the slides that I'll need in order for me to revise for the test. Okay. And then also when I am faced with questions, it will tell me where to go and look for different answers. Is it in chapters 1, 2, or in chapter 3? So in chapter 2, for example, I can see here they are speaking about working with organizational units, user accounts, group accounts, computer accounts, and account management. All right. So where's the other ones? If I look at chapter 1, what are the objectives here? What is the role of Active Directory? How to install Active Directory? What are the different objects that are found in Active Directory? Working with forest trees and domains, and then configuring of group policies. In chapter 3, what are they covering in chapter 3? User accounts and group policies, account policies, resetting of the password and creating password setting objects, and then working with service accounts. So that's now giving me the scope of what's being covered in Learning Unit 1 and Learning Unit 2, which covers chapters 1, 2, and 3. Then the next thing I'll look at is the practice tests that I found on more resources. So I go back to more resources. Apart from my slides now, I'm going to now start going through the tests. So there's chapters, there's tests for all of the different chapters, but I'm going to focus on chapters 1, 2, and 3 in preparation for my test next week, Thursday. So I'll click on chapter 1, it will open it up in a new window, and then I'll begin the test. Now, I can go ahead and answer the different questions, okay, by either typing in answers or selecting the different questions. And then I can click on Save and Submit. It'll tell me, okay, you didn't answer these questions. Do you want to return? I'm going to say, okay. And then I'm going to say, okay again. And now it will show me the review of the test. Even if I've not answered, and if I've just clicked on, and I want to see now, learn what is the main content that is covered in, now how many questions are there here? There's 50 questions, okay? So the next way in which I can identify the most important concepts in the chapter is to go through these questions. Select the specific Windows folder that is a shared folder containing file-based information that is replicated to other domain controllers. It tells me the sysvol folder will contain information that is copied or replicated between multiple domain controllers. And similarly, I can look for the answers or learn the answers for the different types of questions. Which of the following scenarios is not ideal deployment for a single domain structure? A domain structure must be able to utilize different name identities. Okay. In other words, we have different name identities or name conventions for different parts of the organization. Therefore, you would need multiple domain structure for that. Let's look at another one. Which of the following is the primary identifying and administrative unit in Active Directory? A domain. Okay, so the other advantage of doing this is that we are learning the type of questions that they are asking and then the language that they are using to ask these questions and what is expected, what are the expected answers. Often what happens is when we are reading questions in the test, we misinterpret the question and we don't know exactly what is required of us. And then what do? We give the wrong answer. So by going through these review questions here, it is number one, telling us what is the most important concepts that is covered in the chapter. Number two, it is giving us knowledge of how questions are asked and what type of answers are required for the questions. Okay. And number three is it's giving us an overview of where to find different information that we might encounter in the test. Now let's look at some of the past question papers. If I go through, and this is what's required of you, you need to go and have a look at 2020 and 2021. So let's have a look at 2021 paper firstly. So again, I would go to, if I don't know where my test papers are located, which you should know by now, you will go to your student material. Okay, so under the student material, you will search. So I go here to my student material, student repository, student material. And then under student material, I can see that I've got past papers. I click on the past papers, and then I can just search here. So I can put in the module code, which is NTAD6212, and I can put an asterisk here, right? So that will now tell me there's test A, test B. It's brought up the different types of tests, right? So then I can click on them, and then it will show me, it'll open up the test, the relevant test paper. So this is the 2021. Okay, so that's how I access my test papers. Now, if I go and have a look at my, this one here is which year? I can see it's 2021. So if I look at 2021 now, question 1 says, explain the difference between Active Directory container object and a leaf object. Very simply, a container object can contain other objects. For example, an organizational unit. For an organizational unit, I can put in users, groups inside an organizational unit. A domain would be an example of a container object as well, because a domain contains organizational units. A leaf object will be like a user. I can't put a user inside of another user, right? So that would be a leaf object. A computer would be another example of it, a leaf object. The second one says, now see, in my explanation, I told you what was a leaf object, I told you what was a container object, and then I gave examples. And they say give 3 examples of leaf objects. Give 3 examples of container objects. Okay, so now if I wanted to locate this material, I will go. I have come across this in chapter 1 as well. Okay, so the different types of objects found in Active Directory is covered in chapter 1. So if I scroll through, I'll be able to see now there's different components. Do they tell me now there's a tree, a forest, an organizational unit, installing of Active Directory, right? So they take me through that process. Now I'm looking for, this is speaking about the Active Directory schema. And then here they are saying a container object contains other objects. 3 container objects found in Active Directory are organizational units, folder objects, and domain objects. Can you see? Very easily in the notes I've located where to find my answers, right? So then I will write out the answers in my own words, and then I would reference correctly as well. So then let's look at the next question. The next question says, using a diagram consisting of 4 domain controllers, DC1 to DC4, are all located in site 1. Explain what replication topology is, and then describe how Active Directory replication works. Replication topology, or replication, simply means copying of the Active Directory database from one domain controller to another domain controller. So if the domain controllers are inside of the same site, we call that intra-site replication. If they are at different sites, we call it inter-site replication. Okay, now it's necessary for the Active Directory database to be copied so that the domain controllers are aware of the most recent changes to account information or any other Active Directory object information within that domain. So here again, I will go and look for Active Directory replication, okay, which was a copying of the Active Directory database between objects. Did they cover it in which one? Was it covered here in Learning Unit 1, 2, or 3? You can go and have a look at your slides. So if I just go Control F here and I look for replication. The if I look for replication, okay, replication here. The next few sections examine replication, directory partitions, etc. So replication, Active Directory replication, it's covered in chapter 1, right? So I just went Control F on my keyboard and I'm searching for a keyword, replication. And I can see they speak about things like intra-site, inter-site, multiple master, knowledge consistency checker. And then they speak about, there's a replication topology here. You can see they speak about DC1, DC2, DC3, DC4. Are they in the same site? And how do they copy the database of Active Directory objects between each other? Next one. Using three functions of a global catalog server, explain why is it important in a forest. So I go again, and I'm going to look now in my notes for global catalog. Okay, so if I go Control F again, and I'm saying global catalog. Right. So I can see there's the first global catalog partition holds the global catalog, which is a partial replica of all objects in the Active Directory forest. There's a definition of what global catalog is. In other words, the global catalog will know about all objects that is found in the entire Active Directory domain. So there's a global catalog master, and the importance of the global catalog server, right? It tells me clearly here. The first DC installed in the forest is automatically designated as the global catalog server, but additional global catalog servers can be configured. Global catalog servers perform the following vital function. It facilitates domain and forest-wide searches. If I'm looking for an object in a domain or in the forest, I need to search the global catalog server because the global catalog server will know all about it. It facilitates logon across domains. Users can log on to computers in any domain by using their user principal name. The user principal name looks like an email address. Okay, but it's a name. For example, if my username is snidu@iie.ac.za, right? ac.za, iie.ac.za is the domain to which I'm logging on, and my user account within that domain is called snidu. So snidu@iie.ac.za is the user principal name. So that's what it looks like. Hold universal group membership information. Why is this important? This is important because I would need to know if I don't have my universal group membership information, I will not gain access to resources in different domains. So every time I need to gain access to a resource, for example, I'm trying to open up a file or I'm trying to print to a print device, if Active Directory cannot locate my universal group membership, it does not know whether I have permission to open that file or to print to that print device. Okay, so that is the importance now of the global catalog server. So this is now the type of preparation that we need to do when we are going and preparing for our test next week, Thursday. Question 2. List the 4 tasks that can be delegated using organizational unit delegation control. Okay, delegation of control. So this is for OUs using organizational unit delegation of control. So OU tasks. So similarly, I will go and search now for OU. So is this chapter 2, working with organizational units, right? So I can look here for delegation. Delegation, okay? Benefits of using organizational unit, delegation of administrative authority, right? You're able to change the OU structure easily. You can group users and computers for the purposes of managing. They're talking about what is the purpose of using organizational units, right? It can be used for delegation. Now, what can you delegate, right? Delegation of control. A person with a higher security privilege assigns authority to a person with lesser security privileges to perform certain tasks. In other words, I don't give them full control to the organizational unit. I can say, for this organizational unit, what are the different tasks that you are able to perform? So commonly delegated tasks include create, delete, manage user accounts. I can allow a person inside an organizational unit to create user accounts, to delete the user accounts, to manage the user accounts. I can allow the person to do what? Reset user passwords, to read user information, to create and manage groups, to modify membership of groups, to manage group policy links, right? And to generate a resultant set of policy in planning and in logging mode. So if I go back to my test now, I can see they wanted 4 tasks that can be delegated. I found those 4 tasks. The following are permissions and rights. The following are permissions and rights assignments possible for different group scopes. Group scopes now means to which part of the organization does a group membership or the group apply to. So we've come across global and universal group scopes previously. Now you also get a group that is local as well, but we're working with Active Directory here. So the two group scopes that we'll find in Active Directory are global and universal. So they're asking us here, the following are permissions and user rights possible for different group scopes. Resources on any DC or member computer in the domain. Domain local groups in the built-in folder can be added to the access control list only on DCs, not on member computers. Resources on any DC or on member computer. See, a DC has got Active Directory installed and a member computer does not have Active Directory installed. In any domain, in a forest, or trusted domains in any other forest. List 3 types of group scopes and then choose from the above all that apply to the permissions, the rights assignments, and associated with each group scope. Write only the name of the group scope, then the letter or letters applicable, and the answer must be correct to be awarded the full marks for selection. No guessing allowed. So here they want us to list the 3 group scopes, which is local, universal, and then, domain local, universal, and then global. And they say which one of these are applicable. So groups we discussed in chapter 2, wasn't it? So here I can search now for scope. And I can see there they're speaking about group scopes, right? Group type and group scope. Group scope. Group scope determines the reach of a group's allocation in a domain or in the forest. 3 group scopes options are possible in the Windows forest, which are domain local, global, and universal. So I would list those 3. Then a 4th group scope called local applies only to groups created in the Security Accounts Manager or the SAM database of a member computer or a standalone computer. This one is where this computer is not part of the domain, right? So if we are talking about group scopes for the domain, we are talking about these 3 here: domain local, global, and universal. Then what does the next slide say? There, I'm going to find now my answers here, right? Permissions and rights assignment, okay? So this is what they are talking about here. You've got domain local, resources on any DC or member computer in the domain. Global, Resources on any DC or member computer in any domain in the forest or trusted domains. Universal. Resources on any DC or member computer in any domain in the forest or trusted domains in another forest. Can you see? So here I can now see that permissions and right assignment is covered here. In other words, if you're a member of this domain local group, where do you have rights and permissions? Okay, you have rights and permissions on all files, folders, resources on any domain controller or member computer in the domain local group built-in folder can be added to the access control list, the domain access control list on the DC, not member computers, if you are part of domain local. All right. So this is how I would locate now the answers for these here. This is giving me an understanding of what is required for this question. 2.3, it says, using an example to describe how password setting object is created and used. PSO, password setting object. Okay, now I need to look for this password setting object. This was covered in, was it the third one? Password settings, yes, there's it here. Passing settings object, okay? So if I look for PSO, password settings object, it doesn't find PSO, so I'm going to type in password settings. Okay. So I can see delegating of password settings, delegation of password settings, delegation, configuring password setting objects. This is what I'm looking for. So passing setting objects enable an administrator to configure password settings for users or groups that are different from those defined in a GPO linked to the domain, also referred to as fine-grained password policies. Let's understand what this means now. Password setting objects enables an administrator to configure password settings for users or groups that are different from those defined in the GPO linked to the domain. In other words, if I link a policy to the domain, by default, I've got the default domain policy, which will say, for example, users must have a password length of 8 characters and they must change their password every month, right? If I want, for example, to give now certain users or certain groups different password policies, right? Let's say, for example, I want to now make it more secure. So instead of them having passwords that are 8 characters, I want them to have passwords that are 12 characters. Then I can configure a password settings object, put these users into that group, right? And then apply the password setting object to the group so that all of these users now are going to get a password policy. Maybe there's just 10 people that I want them to have very secure passwords. So for those 10 people, I can put them in a separate organizational unit and I can put a password settings object applied to that organizational unit or settings group, right? And then what can I do? Only for those 10 people, they can get a password, a policy that says their passwords must be 12 characters. For everyone else in the domain, their password can be 8 characters. Can you see? So when certain groups of users, their password policies needs to be different from everyone else, I can use this thing called a password settings object. Password setting objects have the effect of overriding account policies set at the domain level, but they aren't configured like a GPO and linked to an organizational unit or a domain. Password setting objects are assigned to users or groups, right? Can you see the difference? So a normal password policy, group policy object, I link it to a domain or I link it to an OU. But this PSO or password settings object, I don't link it. I create it and I apply it to who? To a user or to a group. That's the main difference now between a GPO and a PSO, right? You can see that's a big difference, GPO versus a PSO. Then the last question in this paper speaks about differentiate between the managed service accounts, MSA, and group managed service account. Here as well, in Learning Unit 3, they spoke about, Learning Unit 2, Chapter 3. Service principal names, let's see, working with managed accounts, right? So there's it covered here. Working with managed service accounts. A managed service account has the following attributes or properties. It has a system managed password. It is an automatic SPN support. It is tied to a specific computer, can be assigned rights and permissions, can't be used for interactive logon, and can't be locked out, right? So now they are speaking about managed service accounts. So they speak about these managed service accounts. You will go through this one. And then they say working with group managed service accounts, right? Managed service accounts can be only used on a single server. If a service is running on multiple servers, you can use a group managed service account or GMSA. A group service managed account can be used only on computers running Windows Server 2012 or later with a domain functional level of Server 2012. Created in a similar way to a regular managed service account, only you must use the additional option to specify which servers can use this account, right? So this now is telling us what is the difference between managed service accounts. It's only used to manage service accounts on one computer. Group managed service accounts used to manage service accounts across multiple computers, okay? And then you would give some characteristics and features for this. In the same way now, using the same type of methodology that I've used to answer the questions and to prepare myself, I can then answer the 2019 paper, 2020 paper. What are they asking here? Okay, you, the domain administrator in your organization, your line manager has asked you about the benefits of using Active Directory. So you can scroll through. Varsity Colleges has multiple campuses across South Africa. Each campus is called a site. For this reason, the network is designed and configured to include multiple Windows Server sites and domains. Using three functions of a global catalog server, explain the importance of the global catalog server in Varsity College. So we've spoken about global catalog before. Using a single domain structure, it is usually easier to and less expensive than multiple domain structure, is not always better. In light of the statement, describe the circumstances that make using more than one domain absolutely necessary, right? So then again, they discussed when to use single domain versus multiple domain. That was given to us in chapter 1. Domain local group is one of the different types of security groups in Active Directory. Global group, universal group. We've come across this before, so you can look at that. Now they have drilled down into the actual account settings, and they want to know what is each of these here, right? And then how to define it. Account lockout duration is for how long the user will be locked out. If I use a value of 0, it means indefinitely. It means only when the administrator unlocks it will I be able to regain access to that account. Then Account lockout threshold is how many invalid attempts. In other words, how many times can I type in the password incorrectly? If I type it in incorrectly after 3 times, it will lock me out. Okay, it's like typing your PIN account. You're only allowed a certain number of attempts before you are locked out. Then reset account lockout counter after. In other words, how many minutes must I wait until the account can I try again? Can I get 3 attempts again? Okay. And then next they speak about the administrator created service account is simply a regular user account that you create on the for the purpose of assigning logon accounts. So again, they're asking about service accounts. Describe 5 guidelines to keep in mind when you use a regular account as opposed to a service account. Explain why is it important to consider each of these guidelines as well in your answer. So again, service accounts were covered where? In chapter 3, right? So I will go back and I look at service accounts, make sure I'm familiar with working with managed service accounts and group managed service accounts, and then the characteristics and features of each of them. Right, so this gives you a comprehensive overview now of how to prepare successfully for your test that is next week, Thursday. Just to review what we have done today, we looked at the module outline document. In the module outline document, we found that chapters 1, 2, and 3 from your textbook is being covered. And this covers learning units 1 and 2. So we went and we have a look at what learning units are covered in the test. It is learning units 1 and 2, and it counts 30%, which is a large portion of our mark. Okay. Now, we went and had a look at the past question papers, and we found where to locate the information in the slides. You can also use your textbook as well. We went into RC Learn and we answered the review questions. So in RC Learn, I went into more resources on the left-hand side here, and then under more resources, I found that I had my lecture slides, which the first 3 chapters I was using, and then I went and I answered the practice tests for each of the chapters, chapter 1, 2, and 3. I can say save and submit, and then it will tell me which are the correct answers for each of the questions. So I can read through now and familiarize myself with the content that is covered in Learning Unit 1 and 2, which is chapters 1, 2, and 3. Thereafter, I went through the past question papers and I answered the past question papers. So if I've done all of this, this puts me in a good position to be successful in my test next week, Thursday. Also, remember, importantly, to reference your work. Okay, there's only one textbook, so you would include that textbook reference. And remember, Word has got a built-in function. On previous videos, I've shown you how to do that. So I'll stop recording this and I'll make it available on the YouTube channel, your test preparation for NTAD 6212 test next week, Thursday.